This week, we examine the concept of Masonic truth. We'll read 2 premier articles that just came out, as well take a little detour into the natural sciences. This time, archaeology and the genius of the Neanderthals. All this and more. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry. Here's your host, Brother Robert Johnson.
Welcome back to the show. This is episode number 689. I want to thank our contributors, fellows, producers, and legacy partners of the WCY podcast. It is through your help that we're able to make this show every single week. I know I did take a couple of weeks off, and more on that in a moment. However, since July of 2011, we've been producing this program for folks interested in Freemasonry and its kindred sciences, whether they are members or the profane, as we might say. If you're out there and you're curious on how you can help support the WCY podcast, head on over to our website, wcypodcast.com. Click on Support the Show and check out the various options. I want to thank those of you out there sharing the show with your friends, whether that's on social media or maybe you email them an episode because they had a particular interest in something that we covered. All those things help, so thank you so much. All right, why was I off for a couple of weeks? Well, as you may have heard, if you follow me on social media and things, I had a loss in the family. Somebody pretty important. My mom. My mom transitioned on September 10th. And I want to thank all of you who had reached out and sent me little notes here and there, tagged me on Facebook or whatever. Some people sent me mail, all of those things, and it was all just so overwhelming and wonderful. I want to thank you guys so much for all of that and your understanding as this podcast took a break while I was, dealing with the death in the family and while I was dealing with all of the logistics and, of course, that grieving process that we all have. So, again, thank you so much. It means the world to me that you guys were all so patient, but we're back. We're going to get back on schedule. And so, here we go with this episode. Now, before I kick off the first educational piece, I did want to mention we've got a presentation coming up on October 4th. Lawn Lodge number 815 under the Grand Lodge of Illinois is having a special night of education where I will be doing a presentation. Their invitation says, join us at Lawn Lodge 815 for an evening of light and reflection. I'll be there presenting Born Again and Immortality, Legend, Philosophy, and Fact. We'll explore some timeless Masonic truths through history, philosophy, and symbolism in this thought-provoking lecture. If you'd like to attend, please reach out to Lawn Lodge number 815. You can just Google them under the Grand Lodge of Illinois, and you should be able to find their page and reach out to their secretary. They are located in Oak Lawn, Illinois. Over the past few months, the Grand Lodge of Illinois Education Committee has focused on a 3-run topical set of issues for the Lyceum, which is our educational material or educational magazine for the Grand Lodge of Illinois. It's only education. It's all education. And there's no sort of things about charity or anything else, unless it has to do with education, I should say. And we dedicated an issue a couple of months ago to brotherly love. Then we had an issue on relief. And this one, we wrap it up on this 3-part series with truth. Now this week on the show, I'd like to read you an article that was penned by myself for this particular issue, and one that Brother Darren A. Lainers also penned for this particular issue. So, if you hadn't read them yet, they are available in the Lyceum, which is on the Illinois Lodge of Research's website under Grand Lodge of Illinois Education. You can also find it on the Grand Lodge of Illinois website. And if you are a member of Illinois, you probably got it in your email as well. Anyway, these 2 articles that I have, I'll break them up in the middle with a really cool science article that I found recently having to do with humanity, archaeology, and how our brains have evolved, and perhaps proof of the ingenious mind of Neanderthals. But anyway, first up, let's read What is Truth in Freemasonry? and this is by Worshipful Brother Darren A. Laners. He's a fellow of the Illinois Lodge of Research as well as a committee member for the Education Committee here in the state of Illinois. He says, in the second section of the first degree, we are taught that, quote, truth is a divine attribute and the foundation of every virtue. To be good and true is the first lesson we are taught in Masonry. On this theme, we contemplate and by its dictates endeavor to regulate our conduct. Hence, while influenced by this principle, hypocrisy and deceit are unknown among us. Sincerity and plain dealing distinguish us, and the heart and tongue join in promoting each other's welfare and rejoicing in each other's prosperity. Carl Claudy states in the Entered Apprentice book, in his seminal series Introduction to Freemasonry, that, quote, the final design of Freemasonry is its third principal tenet, the imperial truth. In some aspects, truth seems relative because it is not complete. Then we see it as through a glass darkly. But the ultimates of truth are immutable and eternal. The fatherhood of God, the immortality of the soul. As two aspects of the same object may seem different to different observers, so two aspects of truth may seem different. It is this we must remember when we ask, what is truth in Freemasonry? It is the essence of the symbolism which each man takes for himself. Different as men are different, greater as perception and intelligence are greater, less as imagined and understanding are less. We are told, quote-unquote, on this theme we contemplate. We think of the truths spread before us, and understand and value them according to the quality of our thinking. Doubtless, that is one reason for the universal appeal of Freemasonry. She is all things to her brethren, and gives to all of us her truth in proportion to our ability to receive. In the Fellowcraft degree, the charge to the candidate discusses the importance of the study of liberal arts and sciences. From the same degree, we should remember these are grammar, rhetoric, logic, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. Classically, the 7 are broken into 2 curricula, the trivium and the quadrivium. The trivium is the first 3, grammar, rhetoric, and logic. These focus on the importance of language and analytic thought. The quadrivium focuses on the importance of numbers and their application to understanding the world. The trivium is made up of the liberal arts, while the quadrivium is made up of the liberal sciences. However, there is very little explanation given in the ritual of the importance of each. The only one highlighted is geometry in Illinois ritual, due to its importance to the operative masons who needed to know it to design and build the castles and cathedrals of medieval Europe. However, we do a disservice to ourselves as Freemasons by not understanding why all of them are as important and how they can be used to uncover truth. Grammar is the art of structuring language. It teaches the proper mechanics for writing and speaking. Rhetoric is the art of persuasion. It teaches how to use language to inform, persuade, or motivate an audience. Logic is the art of reasoning. It teaches us how to think clearly, avoid biases, identify fallacies, and construct truthful rhetoric. Arithmetic is the study of numbers. It teaches us a deep understanding of how mathematics is at the root of the scientific discovery and scholarship. Geometry is the study of numbers in space. It teaches us about magnitudes and shapes, and how the relationship between the two offers insight into the operation of the physical world. Music is the study of numbers in time. It teaches us about how music is made up of the mathematical application of harmonious ratios and proportions. Grammar allows you to understand how rules and order are important. It also teaches us how language, following the correct order, is important. Let us not forget that the great light of Masonry, the Bible, begins with the grand architect using grammar to create the known universe by speaking it into existence by saying, "Let there be light," and there was light. If the great architect had instead said light was there and light be there, It grammatically assumes that light pre-existed before the earth was without form and void. The Jewish faith and the Islamic faith both believe that their languages are holy because they believe that those languages are what the great architect spoke when creating our reality. Rhetoric allows you to understand how to wield the power of words. It is what allowed the great architect to order the universe to come into being. It is what allows me to try to persuade you to study the liberal arts and sciences. It builds upon grammar, to allow you to use grammar, to persuade or influence others to agree with you. Rhetoric also requires the next liberal art and science, logic. Logic is what allows you to reason and think. Without logic, you operate on blind faith that what you are being told is empirical truth. If you accept that everything that is told to you is truthful, you are more likely to fall victim to a scam, be gaslit, or have blind allegiance to a sect or cause. Logic is what allows you to intake rhetoric and be persuaded or disagree with said rhetoric. Logic allows you to take rhetoric from a hypothesis about it, collect data about what you are being told, and verify it by using other data points to verify whether it is truthful or not. While our ritual places a great importance on the study of geometry, it is a part of the quadrivium. I would argue that logic is as important for the trivium. I would argue that logic is as important for the trivium. Logic is what allows for critical thought. Critical thought is what keeps us, as a society, from descending into barbarism. Logic is also what allows for the quadrivium. Without logic, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy could not exist. This is because all science is based on finding empirical truth. And without the ability to apply logic, we would not have the capacity to study anything. Arithmetic, being the study of numbers, uses logic for the verification of a theorem. For example, we know that 2 plus 2 equals 4 because we can verify it. Logic tells me that if I hold up 2 of my fingers on my left hand and 2 fingers on my right, I can count them to see that they make 4. I can do the same thing by holding up 1 finger on one hand and 3 fingers on the other, or 4 fingers on one hand and none on the other. All these different permutations still add up to 4. It would be illogical and incorrect to have 4 fingers held up and call it anything other than 4. Geometry is explained in our Fellowcraft degree as the foundation of architecture and the root of the mathematics. Our ritual states, quote, "By this science the architect is enabled to construct his plans and execute his designs, the general to arrange his soldiers, the engineer to mark out grounds for encampments, the geographer to give us the dimensions of the world and all things therein contained, to delineate the extent of the seas and specify the divisions of empires, kingdoms, and provinces. By it also the astronomer is enabled to make his observations and to fix the duration of times and seasons, years and cycles." End quote. Geometry would be the most important science to the operative stonemason as they shaped their ashlars in the quarry and placed their designs on their trestle boards. Again, it is truthful because mathematics is a truth that is empirical. Music has been used by mankind in various ways. It has been used to celebrate, dance, pray, soothe, or arouse the senses, to instill courage or to terrify, to commemorate or to unite. In Plato's dialogue, Timaeus, the world is created from the musical compositions of a god, who is a musician. Music should play a prominent role in Freemasonry, although many lodges have gotten away from its use. There are also many famous musicians and composers who were or are Freemasons. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, Franz Joseph Haydn, Johann Christian Bach, Irving Berlin, John Philip Sousa, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, Brad Paisley, Stoney LaRue, Apathy, Tobias Forge, John Entwistle, Des Ferreira, Tom DeLonge, Mel Gaynor, Derek Forbes, Marshall Goodman, and Bob Dylan are just a few. The Grand Lodge of Illinois Book of Ceremonials has the following to say about the office of organist in the ritual for the installation of officers. Brother Blank, you are appointed organist of Blank Lodge. Under the direction of the worshipful master, you will conduct the musical services of the lodge. As harmony is the strength and support of all institutions, so may the harmony over which you shall preside strengthen and support every gentle and ennobling emotion of the soul. Music is also truthful, because, at its root, it is based on mathematics. Astronomy has a deep connection to Freemasonry as well. Within our ritual and symbols, we refer to the sun, moon, stars, comets, and other celestial phenomena. Robert Hewitt Brown's opus, Stellar Theology and Masonic Astronomy, should be read by every Freemason who is interested in learning about the connections between astronomy, theology, and Masonic symbolism. In fact, the second section of the third degree is rooted deeply in astronomical symbolism if you know how to interpret it. It has also been proposed that one of the functions of King Solomon's Temple is that it was an astronomical observatory. Astronomy, being the study of mathematics and space and time, is also truthful. What I hope to have illustrated is that by the use of the liberal arts and sciences, we as Freemasons can discover truth. The liberal arts and sciences allow us to study the wondrous canopy that the great architect has designed, and through it, come to the realization that the rules that govern the known universe, studied under the various branches of science, are emanations of the divine, and therefore as true as the fatherhood of God. That expression, through the arts, is as sacred as the great architect's first expression in the creation of the universe in which we reside. This is why the liberal arts and sciences and their study are so important to Freemasonry. They provide us with a means to better understand our relationship with the great architect, and through their study of them, we can understand the world and our relationship to it. We can observe the truth and beauty that is hidden in plain sight for all of us to discover. Darren A. Laners. Love that piece, and I think something that is really important to remember here, if you boil this down, is that paying attention to the liberal arts and sciences in your quest for truth is not enough. You must know how and why these liberal arts and sciences work and how they are applied in order to use them to sort of take apart and put back together anyone's particular viewpoint or political ideologies or even philosophies. And yes, even things in our own lives, as simple as familial communications. So I want to thank Darren for putting this one together for the magazine in particular. I hope you enjoyed it here, and I'll say it again later, but we'll have a link back to the issue in the show notes. Now, as I have done many times before, I will read a science article because it is part of the liberal arts and sciences, as well as thinking about humanity and how we have shown our genius even in times so far back that we think, oh, these guys were just dullards walking around with sticks. Well, maybe not so much. A newfound bone point predates tool-toting Homo sapiens' arrival in Eastern Europe. In fact, the title of this article, short article I should say, Neanderthals invented bone-tipped spears, all on their own. That's right. No one showed them how to do it. They didn't see it somewhere else. This was a moment of their own genius. Let's check this out. It's by Taylor Michael Brown, who was posted on May 7th, 2025, right around noon on sciencenews.org. Neanderthals may have been forging projectile weapons out of animal bones 50,000 years earlier than previously thought. A bone fragment unearthed from roughly 80,000-year-old rock in Europe shows signs of sharpening and bitumen residue, which is a sticky tar suggesting the point was once attached to some sort of shaft, perhaps to make a spear or other projectile weapon. Archaeologist Lyubov Golovanova and her colleagues report in the July Journal of Archaeological Science. Neanderthals made wooden spears as early as 300,000 years ago, but evidence of bone-tipped projectile weapons before 40,000 years ago is scarce. That makes the new finding the oldest and only known Neanderthal-made bone-tipped projectile, the researchers say. Previous excavation at the North Caucasus cave site, called Mezmezkaya, reveal remains of 3 individuals as well as hunted prey animals, including bison, deer, and mountain goat. To better understand the newfound artifact, the team studied the bone fragment using high-powered microscopy and tomography. A little larger than a U.S. postage stamp, the artifact displays marks indicating it had been sawed, carved, and sharpened to a point. Bitumen residue on the bone suggests it had been attached to a shaft, and a small fracture at its tip indicates it had broken after use. Until recently, anthropologists theorized that Neanderthals gained such knowledge from Homo sapiens migrating from Africa into Eurasia and beyond. After all, the earliest known bone-tipped weapons made by Homo sapiens, knives and spears found in Morocco and South Africa, date to around 90,000 to 62,000 years ago, respectively. The Neanderthal-made bone point is similar in size and shape to those associated with projectile weapons made by Homo sapiens, but its age suggests that bone-tipped projectiles were quote-unquote invented by Neanderthals independently and long before the appearance of modern human groups in Europe, says Galanova of the ANO Laboratory of Prehistory in St. Petersburg, Russia. Now, Homo sapiens arrived in the Caucasus around 34,000 years ago, and their bone-tip technology proliferated around the same time, or spread around, roughly 46,000 years after the Neanderthal bone point was made. The researchers also compared the newfound bone artifact to pointed antlers and bones used on projectile weapons made by Homo sapiens in Europe, identifying many parallels in how the tool was sculpted. However, the Neanderthal artifact does not appear to have undergone the same polishing or grinding as weapons made by Homo sapiens, Galanova says. This unique construction, plus the artifact's age, suggests that Neanderthals invented their own bone points using their own methods without the influence of Homo sapiens. Neanderthals are, quote-unquote, not traditionally thought to have been cognitively capable of such advanced technology, says archaeologist Justin Bradfield of the University of Johannesburg. Quote, "This finding helps add a new dimension to our understanding of the species." End quote. Others agree that the discovery indicates Neanderthals made bone tools much earlier than expected, but remain unconvinced by the team's conclusion. Quote, "From a hunting perspective, the Mezmezkaya point appears too light and fragile to have functioned as a lethal tip of a weapon," says Malvina Baumann, an archaeologist at the University of Bordeaux in France. To better assess the bone point and its potential function, Bowman would like to see a thorough comparative analysis with other known bone tools. Fascinating. What I find really interesting about this is the thoughts about how old we are as a species. To suggest we are, relatively young is so laughable now. We have carbon dating and all of these other things that allow us to date the human species, and to see the huge steps that we have made in terms of moving forward, both intellectually and philosophically speaking. I suppose those are both intellectual, but in a way, thinking about how we advance and that we make our lives easier by the creation of tools and all of these things, right? We constantly would be bombarded with articles. I think about, in the 80s and 90s, when the West had this obsession or quasi-obsession with chimpanzees and showing how they used tools or sticks to get ants out of a anthill to eat them. In this instance, this shows that they were creating something more. It's not just a stick. I'm reminded of our Fellowcraft lecture when we talk about the orders in architecture, when we say something like, "From the first formations of society, orders in architecture may be traced. Man planted trees on end, laid others across to support a covering, and the bands which connected these trees at top and bottom are said to have given rise to the idea of the base and capital of pillars." Right? It talks about how man developed a use for the natural world around him. And I think that's really neat. And I hope you enjoyed this short scientific paper. You can find more at sciencenews.org. Check it out. Link back in the show notes to this article. Moving on. I promised an original paper that I wrote for the Lyceum, also around the topic of truth. And here was my contribution. I hope you enjoy. Truth is a divine attribute, by Right Worshipful Brother Robert H. Johnson, Fellow of the Illinois Lodge of Research, and a committee member of the Grand Lodge of Illinois on Education. In my first philosophy class in college, we began to learn things that I thought we probably should have learned in high school. I still think that's the case, generally speaking. While the world loses its belief that a collegiate education is necessary, I believe at least an associate's degree in liberal arts is a good move. I digress. Back to my first philosophy class. We spent a great deal of time speaking about absolute truth and prima facie truth. Wait, how can there be more than one truth? Well, it's like this. An absolute truth is an idea that you can apply to anything, and the answer is always the same. A prima facie truth is an idea that may change depending on the situation. Many examples were laid upon our fresh young brains in that class. Many were disturbing. But this was also necessary to get us to understand the impact of these two ideas when applied to the world that we live in, or our reality. For instance, if I said, murder is wrong, is that an absolute truth or a prima facie truth? What is the circumstance? What if you could go back in time and kill Adolf Hitler before he rose to power? That certainly would be murder. But say it again. Murder is wrong. Is it absolute or prima facie? Another powerful example I remember well. We had a guest lecturer one day, a Holocaust survivor. He recounted the following, paraphrased, quote, "The German soldiers were coming into the home. There were 7 of us, including a newborn. We ran to an area of the house that had a false wall, and we opened it. We packed ourselves into it. We could hear the soldiers walking through the house, asking questions. We were all very frightened. We were so quiet. You could not hear anyone breathe. Then the newborn began to whimper. It was hungry, we all were, but the baby began to get louder. At first, the mother held the child against her breast to soothe it. The seconds turned into minutes. We all stayed very quiet, even the newborn. When the soldiers had left, we were able to come out of the hiding spot. We were relieved. All of us except the mother of the newborn. You see, she had killed her baby by suffocating it to save us all. I never knew if it was accidental or if it was with fear she held the baby so tight. I never asked." End quote. Our professor then asked us, "Is it true that the mother was justified in her action?" Many of the students in class spoke out and expressed to our professor that this was an unfair question. He reminded us that this is the issue with truth. Is this statement absolutely true or prima facie? Murder is wrong. Aha! The class seemed to sit back in a collective sigh and loosely agreed that murder, however wrong it is, perhaps may be justified, but that we cannot know for certain because we haven't lived within the circumstances described. So here we are, absolute truth, prima facie, and now its accomplice, context. Today, around the world, as we learn more about people and their situations in life, we begin to understand more introspectively the concept of quote-unquote walking a mile in someone's shoes. This is perspective. It's an important tool in communicating with all people. It aids in creating empathy, or rather an emotional connection to the person we're communicating with, and this, in turn, validates the person's feelings with whom you're speaking. Said differently, they know you care and are listening, not to respond, mind you, but to listen. You may have heard people say, "I'm living my truth," or perhaps, "They're living their truth." This alludes to the concept of subjective and objective truth. In short, subjective truth is true for the subject, person who is claiming it as their truth. Objective truth is a little trickier. Some would say that objective truth is a truth that is true from the standpoint of an observer. Think of it this way. Subjective truth is what you say you did. An objective truth might be a video showing anyone watching it what you did. Can these be different? Yes. Truth is complex. Let us also remember something that is true while examining truth. Objective truth is what everyone in a given society agrees it to be, but it still doesn't mean it's true. We must recognize that cultures around the world often approach things differently than we do in the Western world. For instance, while we may view shaking hands to be respectful, the objective truth in the United States, there are places in the world where this is not the case. So if I say shaking hands is a sign of respect, it is a completely subjective statement, if we do not add a qualifier, like in the United States. Another thought experiment that occurs to me is one that another professor of mine once proposed. For context, this was a philosophy and religion class. The professor taught objectively, and after graduation, we went out for coffee. Finally, he let me call him John and not Professor Rund. I remember telling him, I could never pin you down. Are you a Christian, Jewish, Buddhist? I couldn't figure you out. He told me that by saying that, I gave him a great compliment. He taught objectively. He never gave a clue. He did tell me, I'm what you might call a C.S. Lewis Christian. He was also a teacher and a minister for a church that was associated with a collegiate institution. One day in class, Professor Rund proposed this scenario regarding a person's individual truth and what we believe. Quote, there are two people, Jan and Max. Max is a devout follower of his religion, and he believes that his God is the most powerful force in the universe. Jan believes the same. Although she believes in a different God than Max, Jan was overheard saying that she believes that every person has their own truth, and that it's real for them. End quote. Can you spot the problem here? It's not just semantics. How can Jan believe that individual truth is real, while both believing that her God is most powerful, and that Max believes his God is most powerful? These are complex examples and are not easy to grapple with, especially if we're truly thinking deeply on them. Sure, you might have an instant answer for these questions, and yet, if your mind is satisfied with knowing the answer from a gut reaction, we must ask, have we truly examined the questions, statements, and our own conscious thoughts on the matter? We're Freemasons, and called to be better. To be examples to the world in whatever ways we can exemplify grace, goodness, and yes, truth. Hannah Arendt, 1906 to 1975, was a German-born Jewish political theorist and philosopher renowned for her work on totalitarianism, the nature of evil, and political action. Forced to flee Nazi Germany in 1933, she later settled in the United States, where she wrote influential books like The Origins of Totalitarianism and Eichmann in Jerusalem, a report on the banality of evil. In Eichmann in Jerusalem, she introduced the concept of the banality of evil, suggesting that horrific acts can stem from the thoughtlessness rather than inherent wickedness. Her experiences as a refugee shaped her insights into the dangers of oppressive regimes and the importance of individual thought and responsibility in resisting them. In her essay Truth in Politics, Arendt argued that mass lying undermines our sense of reality by which we find our bearings in the real world. The result of a consistent and total substitution of lies for factual truth is not that the lie will now be accepted as truth and truth be defamed as a lie, but that the sense by which we take our bearings in the real world and the category of truth versus falsehoods is among the mental means to this end is being destroyed. One is reminded of the type of truths that perhaps matter most in these troublesome days, that of the truth in history. During his rule of the Soviet Union, from the late 1920s to 1953, Joseph Stalin systematically rewrote history to eliminate his enemies, glorify his own role, and consolidate absolute power. This manipulation was conducted through censorship, airbrushing photographs, and controlling the historical narrative in official books and media. Now, while not rewriting history, another example is of Adolf Hitler and the Nazis, who systematically manipulated public perception through propaganda and censorship to fit their political narrative. This was central to their rise to power. consolidation of control and implementation of genocide. Rather than fabricating a new past from scratch, the Nazis exploited existing historical grievances and anti-Semitic ideas, presenting a distorted version of history that aligned with their ideology. As Freemasons, we stand for truth. We stand for progress. We stand for knowledge. Our organization has withstood the test of time, and it is precisely because of our tenets of brotherly love, relief, and truth that we will continue to be a beacon of light and a testament to truth. We must be aware of the world around us. We must recognize when truth is rewritten in favor of a narrative, political, social, or even in our own spheres of influence. What can we do when we see these things? We can be Freemasons. As Dwight L. Smith once said, try Freemasonry. Let us whisper good counsel. Let us befriend and offer to listen to another's perspective while also offering instruction, if appropriate, within our ranks. To the profane, offer an ear, give grace, and offer insights that we might find common ground. As our ritual states, truth is a divine attribute and the foundation of every virtue. Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this look at the different quote-unquote types of truth that there are. But again, we must understand that philosophically speaking, there are ways that truths are different and are dependent on the context. And yet there are still empirical truths that Darren spoke about in his article. Those are things that we can see with our own eyes that have no other context. You know, 4 fingers in front of your face, there are 4 fingers, this kind of thing. I hope you can use your mental faculties to go beyond something that has been shared on social media or shared by a particular person on a social network, and look for that same story on a separate news site, one that maybe you think is a terrible news site because it's opposite to the normal political type of news you might read, where you go back and forth. And you can probably discern the truth not from either article, but from your ability to take the facts from both, remove the spin, and think about it for yourself. There's always a spin. You have to ask yourself why they're selling that to you. Why does it matter? Well, if you can figure that out, that's the $1 million question. But the most important thing of all is to remember that we have a duty as Freemasons to truth. Once more, I want to thank our producers, fellows, legacy partners, and our contributors to the WCY podcast. If you're out there and you're thinking, hey, how can I assist this program in producing quality Masonic education that's trusted and comes out every week, head on over to our website, wcypodcast.com, click on support the show, check out the various options. And again, my thanks to you for any considerations. Hopefully, I will see you all at either Oak Lawn Lodge or I'll see you at Grand Lodge sessions coming up here in just a couple of weeks. But until next week, stay on the level. For Whence Came You, I'm Robert Johnson. Take care.
You've been listening to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry with your host, Brother Robert Johnson. Be sure to join us for our next edition.
WCY Media.
Why, that BBS not the map.